Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cultured Pull List. In this week's episode, we are going to be covering the first volume of the New 52, The Flash Run, continuing our month of Flash. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. We are your hosts, Mike and Luke. This is your first time watching our show. Welcome. This is your first time. What we normally do on the show is we talk about the story. We break down, give a summary of it, and then we talk about what we thought about it and stuff like that. Just kind of break it down. So we are continuing with our month of Flash because the Flash movie is coming out in just a week now. And we are continuing with the suggested reading that DC has kind of given. This was at the end of the first Flash trailer, but we already covered Flashpoint. So if you did not see our episode on that, that was a couple weeks ago. Go ahead and check that out. But this week we are covering the first volume of the New 52 Flash. And then next week we're going to be talking about the Flash 3-issue official movie tie-in. It's like a prequel to the movie itself, so that'll be interesting. But yeah, a few little things for context. So the New 52, for those of you who don't know, this happened right after the whole Flashpoint thing, where Barry basically reset the DC universe when he went back in time, and then went back in time again and kind of reset everything, set everything right, but a lot of things changed. So in this continuity, Barry's been Flash for 5 years, but I don't think he doesn't have any memories of the previous continuity or anything.
Right.
Even though he had memories of them at first, it seems like they got reset over time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's not with Iris yet. They know each other, but they aren't really a thing or anything. So that's pretty much the only context needed for this story. It's a pretty standalone story. So this is called The Flash Volume 1 Move Forward. It's written by Francis Manipal and Brian Buccellato. The artist is Francis Manipal, and the colorists are Brian Buccellato with Ian Herring. And the letterers are Sal Caprino, Carlos M. Mengual, and Wes Abbott. And this is an 8-issue arc, I guess, and it was released between November 2011 and June 2012. So the story opens with Barry and his fellow forensic scientist, Patty Spivot, on their first date, which is this tech symposium. Seems kind of like a display, almost like a science fair kind of thing, but just for a bunch of tech. And yeah, for those of you who have watched the TV series, Patty Spivot was in season 2 in the middle of 3 of that show, and she was Barry's love interest. So they kind of got this from the New 52 run, I believe. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so they're on their first date. It'd taken Barry 2 years to work up the nerve to ask her out. But so Barry and Patty, they're having a good time. They briefly talk with a scientist named Dr. Elias, who ends up being important later on. But he's presenting his work at the symposium, and suddenly several masked men who are wearing this tactical gear break the ceiling window, break through, and start attacking people. And they steal this strange little box from Dr. Elias. But Barry quickly changes into his costume, which that is another change with the New 52, is his suit seems less fabric and it seems more like a plated armor style, but it still comes out of his ring. It's not really clear how, but kind of cool though, I think. So Barry makes pretty quick work of these guys. He just kind of starts going through them and kind of chases them away, but they manage to run away with the device they stole. But Barry's able to jump onto the helicopter and grab onto one of the assailants, as well as grabbing onto the thing they stole. but he falls off the helicopter and ends up falling um, into the street. But first, he manages to throw the guy that he grabbed through the window of a building, and then he's able to phase through the street into the sewer below. But vibrating at this frequency seems to like cause him to have to release a lot of energy, and it blows a hole in the street. And we are introduced to Iris West for the first time in this story, this continuity, and she just kind of peers in, is like, "You okay?" Like, I'm from the Central City Gazette or whatever it's called. Flash then goes and returns the thing that was stolen to Dr. Elias, who tells him that it's a genome recoder. But right after that, Barry is called away to a crime scene, and it turns out that the crime scene is the guy he threw through the window, and apparently this guy is dead, and everyone saw Flash throw throw the guy in there, so they're kind of blaming Flash. And Patty pulls the mask off of the guy, and Barry recognizes him as his friend Manuel, and we kind of get a quick flashback of them running, like, is kind of having this experience. It's not super important what it is, but we obviously get the impression that they were pretty good friends. So then the next scene takes place at the Central City Police Department, and everyone's working on this case, and the captain seems to really want to know to see if Flash is responsible or not. It seems like he isn't. It seems like this what's his name, Director Singh, seems to think that the guy died. Well, Manuel died of some other cause, just kind of dropped dead. It wasn't the impact of what Flash did. So the next scene, we see Flash is kind of brooding on top of, I believe it's the roof of Dr. Elias's lab. And Dr. Elias tells him, that it wasn't his fault, that they, don't beat yourself up over it. But Flash still kind of feels a little responsible of it, mainly because it's his friend. He's feeling kind of upset about that, and he asks to use Dr. Elias's genome recoder because he thinks that was what caused Manuel to die. And Dr. Elias says okay. So Barry takes the gene recoder back to his place and starts working on it, also trying to figure out like where Manuel has been all this time and what caused him to be a part of this heist. And as he's in the middle of working on this guy in a hoodie just pops up in his apartment, and it turns out it's Manuel somehow. And before Barry can really get any answers, his door is kicked down, and Manuel and Barry hop out of the window and run away from these guys. But they don't get too far from them when Barry thinks he kind of needs to be the Flash at this point. So he pretends to trip and fall in the lake or river, not really sure which, and he turns into the Flash and goes after Manuel, but he catches up to him and the assailants, but it turns out they're all Manuel. At least they all look like Manuel, which surprises Barry, understandably. But he pretty quickly regains his composure and just starts to take all of them out with his super speed. But before he's able to save Manuel, one of the, I'm just going to call them clones, tells him that they have Iris West and he needs to back off and leave them alone, and they'll have Iris call him. I think they leave him like a cell phone, and Iris will call him when they're far enough away, and they let her go. So as soon as Iris calls him, he rushes over to find her and make sure she's okay. Then he runs off. And I did forget to mention this earlier. This will be important later, but when they were wheeling Manuel's body away, not the initial Manuel, who seems like a clone at this point. Iris did catch Barry outside and kind of made arrangements to like contact him further because she's trying to get info about the case for a story she's doing on the Flash and everything. So anyway, back to where we are. There's not much of a transition, but apparently Barry is working with Dr. Elias, and Dr. Elias kind of wants to gauge his powers and run diagnostics on like his abilities. And he has Barry run on this treadmill he created, which is very reminiscent of the cosmic treadmill.
Right.
But Barry's powers destroy it pretty easily, but it's still enough for Dr. Elias to get a pretty good gauge on his powers and everything. And he realizes that Barry is able to tap into this energy source, which Barry says he calls the Speed Force. And Dr. Elias says, well, technically your brain should be able to tap into the Speed Force too, and you should be able to think like as fast as you're able to move, which kind of surprises Barry. And he kind of tries to work on it, but it doesn't seem to really like come to him immediately. But then he and Patty have a quick conversation on the roof of the Central City Police Department, and I'm pretty sure he tells Patty like about his friend and everything during that time, about Manuel, and kind of like what's confusing about everything. But then Iris texts him, and his powers kind of unlock then for some reason, and he's basically able to process like multiple different inputs at the same time. Like he's able to like hear what Patty's saying and like see all this other stuff in the background. So Iris texts him to meet because she wants to ask him some questions. So they meet, and his powers activate again. He's basically able to stop like a jewelry store robbery.
Mhm.
He's able to plan it all out like beforehand, basically map every single possibility of what might happen, and then do it. So he's basically learning to use his brain to tap into the Speed Force and think
Mhm.
crazy fast. But while he and Iris are talking, she actually does give him some information. She was able to figure out that his friend Manuel was in the CIA, and that he is presumed dead at this point. But she found like somehow she got her hands on his old passport. And Barry's actually able to use the passport to kind of retrace Manuel's steps,
Mhm.
which leads him to this pig farm in Somalia, which kind of confuses him at first. But the farmer there says that this used to be like a government-run facility, but they just kind of packed their bags and left. But they also left these pigs, which seems like they were using the pigs for something. And then there was a brief flashback. We see that Manuel did at one point try to call Barry while he was on some assignment, and he had lost his hand, but he's
Mhm.
quickly captured seemingly by the U.S. Army and dragged back to wherever they want to take him. And there's also like another flashback of Manuel and Barry meeting at some party, and just kind of like the first time they meet and become friends. So then we cut to Manuel, who was with all of his doppelgangers, and they seem to need Manuel. They seem to be dying for some unknown reason. Something wrong with their genetic code, and they need Manuel to fix it. And they also need this other guy called Dr. Guerrero, who they're forcing to help him or help them. And once Dr. Guerrero turns on this machine, there's this crazy like huge flare and this EMP
Mhm.
pulse that knocks out all the electricity in I believe Central City and Keystone City.
Right.
And um, at this time, Iris is actually in I think Iron Heights.
Mhm.
She's there to meet an inmate there to get more information on the Flash from him. But then the power goes out, and while the guards are distracted, Iris is kidnapped or is grabbed from behind by somebody. We're not sure who at this point, but this plane, this big passenger plane, was caught in the EMP blast and starts to fall towards Central City. And Flash sees it and runs towards it and is trying to figure out how to stop it from crashing into the city. And he's actually able to um, jump inside the plane, vibrate through the molecules, and get inside. And then he's able to vibrate the plane at a frequency where it's able to pass through the bridge into the water. And so he ends up saving everyone inside, and he even has the time to like sign an autograph and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, But meanwhile, the Manuel doppelgangers blame Dr. Guerrero for the thing, and they shoot him. And there seems to be kind of some infighting. Like some are like pretty quick to kill people, and the others aren't like as keen to do so. And then we get a brief flashback of Manuel in this government facility, and he's basically being told, like, yeah, we're going to experiment on you and make you like a super soldier, like the perfect soldier type thing. And um, then we cut back to Iron Heights, where it turns out that Iris's contact was Captain Cold, who seems to have actual cold powers after
Right.
ice powers, and not just a gun. And um, he doesn't seem to really give her much information, but he's the one that grabbed her. But now all the inmates are free because of the blackout, and they're attacking the guards and just have full free range of the place. So Barry is now running around the city trying to help everyone who is in danger or needs help now that the city has no power. And then we cut to Dr. Elias, who has been able to track this energy, the energy signature of the like EMP blast out into this place called the Badlands, which is like the outskirts of like Keystone City. And he finds this old tank there that has the same energy signature as the EMP. And there's kind of just these random people out there. I'm not really sure what they're doing there, but it's kind of like a Mad Max like scavenger thing going on.
Yeah.
But then the doppelgangers, I believe I don't know if they said at this point, but they're called Mob Rule.
Right.
Just kind of interesting. But so they show up and they take Dr. Elias, and they're like, we need you and your gene recoder. You're gonna help us basically. And yeah, that's that. So then we cut to the Central City Police Department, and the captain is handing out assignments because this city needs as much help as they can get. And Patty tells Barry that she was actually able to find some leads on Manuel and what he was going through. And apparently, she tracks down a bunch of scientists in Keystone and Central City, like the surrounding cities, that all worked for a government program called Project Bellator. And I guess those doctors, those scientists had been disappearing. And it seems like those are the scientists that Mob Rule has been kidnapping to help them. So Patty kind of volunteers herself and Barry to go to this one section of the city where a lab is, one of the scientists' labs is, but they have to use horses because
Right.
cars don't work because the EMP. And they go to this lab. They actually see a couple of the Mob Rule guys there, and they actually find Manuel, who is now missing both of his hands. And they're able to unstrap him from the chair and attempt to escape, but then Mob Rule sees them and tries to stop them. Barry manages to shove Manuel and Patty out of the door, and one of the Mob Rule guys has a gun trained on him, and he is able to access the Speed Force with his brain again. But at this point, he's not that great at it, and it turns out he's actually like kind of getting confused about what he's actually like imagining and processing in his brain and what he's actually doing. So he seems to think he's actually taking out the Mob Rule guys, but in fact, he's just planning it out and thinking it in his head. And he ends up getting kind of like distracted, and he ends up getting shot by Mob Rule, seemingly in the head. And Patty sees it and freaks out, obviously, for obvious reasons. And then we see another flashback, which is Manuel's father's funeral. For whatever reason, Manuel isn't there. It seems like he and his mom aren't on the best of terms. But it turns out, it seems like his father was killed by some like operatives in some other country. Seemed like his dad was like in the army or something, and Manuel basically wants to join the CIA to like basically get revenge for his father's on his father's killers. So then we cut to Dr. Elias in the Badlands with Mob Rule, and they basically tell him, they explain that Manuel was experimented on by the U.S. government, and they basically gave him cellular regeneration powers, healing powers, and he was able to like go after all of the people responsible for his father's death. Like, at first he was an agent for the US government, but eventually he goes rogue and goes after everyone responsible for his dad's death. But eventually he's captured and tortured, but every time they cut off a body part or hurt him, he heals. And they're like, they end up torturing him for like months, and they just kind of discard his body parts they cut off, and the body parts actually start growing new bodies themselves, and that's how there's all these clones of him. They're all just like discarded body parts. But they seemed, and then once there were enough of them, they actually banded together and saved Manuel and got him out of there. But pretty soon after, some of the clones started to die, and instead of helping them, Manuel just kind of ran away, struck off on his own, which is kind of a big theme of his character. Every time
Mhm.
Barry have a flashback together, Manuel's like running away from, like, he pissed somebody off and he's running away, or he like slept with some guy's wife and like is running away from the husband, stuff like that.
Right, right.
He's like running away from his mistakes all the time. So keeping in that theme, once he and Patty escape from that lab, um, Manuel hops on a horse and tries to get Patty to leave with him, but Patty says she's not going to just pack up and leave. People need her. So Manuel's like, well, all right, I'm gone. And then we cut to Iris, who is hanging out in Captain Cold's cell, but manages to find a way out, which I don't know if it's really going to do her that much good because there's a bunch of criminals hanging
Right.
out in the main area. But then we go back to Manuel, who's running away on his horse. Mob Rule catches up with him, and he didn't see Barry get shot, but one of the Mob Rule clones says, "Yeah, we killed Barry," and he freaks out like, "You killed my friend," and starts to attack them. But they manage to subdue him. Then we go back to Barry, who is still in the lab. He wakes up and realizes that he doesn't really have a handle on his Speed Force brain power yet. And then he comes across these timed explosives, and he runs for the window, is able to activate his suit and jump out the window right as the lab explodes.
So this issue starts with kind of there are three flashes to three different events that are all happening at the same time. The first one is Emmanuel and his Mob Rule are with Dr. Elias and have convinced him that they need to use his machine to kind of rework his Emmanuel's DNA, so that, because like you mentioned, they're all kind of slowly dying off, and so the idea is that if they fix his DNA, they'll stop doing that. And then over here we have Iris, and she has managed to get out of the cell, but like you mentioned, there's a bunch of kind of just a total riot happening at Iron Heights. And I didn't know that there was a villain called the Folded Man, but I think that's kind of funny.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. It's funny.
Yeah. And then over here at the bridge, I don't know if it's the bridge between I don't know where this bridge is, but it's a bridge, and it was the bridge that the Flash phased the airplane through earlier.
Right.
And so the cops don't really know like what's happening with this bridge. If a plane is able to go through it, is it still safe for people to walk across? They don't really know, so they're not letting anyone cross. And then the people are starting to get kind of upset, as you can see there. And then the Flash is I don't really understand what is happening. Well, I know what's happening, but I don't understand the science behind it. He's able to run really fast, and then like the boats are kind of able to like follow in his momentum or something like that. I don't really know, but anyway.
Yeah, like the draft of like his air, like his back draft or whatever.
Right. So anyway, yeah, he's able to get two boats across the river, and then he says that like, yeah, he's able, the bridge is fine, it's all good, and so they're able to cross the bridge. He saves Iris, and then yeah, he's over here saving Iris from the people in Iron Heights. And then we cut back to Mob Rule, and they started the machine, and yeah, so the original manual is connected to the machine. They're not really sure what's going to happen, but hopefully it'll fix his DNA. One thing I noticed in this issue, well, this whole series, the arc in general, is that there's a lot of like double page splash.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
I think there's like 3 in a row, but anyway, yeah. Yeah, and so it starts to act. I think it puts Emmanuel in a lot of pain, and so Barry's like, "We got to get him out of this machine," but he's like, "No, I need to fix my DNA." But then it starts to go a little haywire, and so he kind of like creates what he calls a vortex, and so he runs around it really fast to kind of contain
Mhm.
the explosion, and I think what he just so he kind of like sends it up into the atmosphere, like it makes a little tornado and it just kind of flies away, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so all of them, including the original Emmanuel, are all dead. And then we got back to the warehouse in Keystone City, where they look and Patty doesn't know that Barry's still alive, but then he shows up and she's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm alive."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then so the issue ends. Well, I guess actually Emmanuel's still alive, and he's kind of not really happy with the Flash and all that. Um,
Hmm.
so then the issue ends with Dr. Alice. Is that his name?
Dr. Elias, I think.
Elias. Yeah, Elias and the Flash talking about kind of his new powers and how he mentions to the Flash that his powers are kind of like opening wormholes in time and space. So like the faster he
Hmm.
runs, the less stable reality gets.
Hmm.
And then in
Well,
the
yeah,
next
and that's what caused the EMP. Like the
right.
energy coming from his machine flash like opened a wormhole and like sent it back in time, and that's what caused the
Mhm.
EMP or something.
Right, exactly. And also that tank from earlier just
Right,
kind of
right,
showed
right,
up and
right.
there's other pieces throughout history that there shouldn't be
Hmm.
where they are, and so that's kind of
Yeah.
what he explains as the wormhole. So this next issue opens up in the present. Most issues do that, but this is important for the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, the Captain Cold is able to use like ice powers, like he generates ice with his hands.
Hmm.
And so in the internal monologue, Barry's talking about how normally um, Captain Cold is very like collected. He like follows like a strict rules, like not
Yeah.
necessarily the like laws, but he has
Like a
like his own kind
thieves
of
code.
internal, yeah, exactly. But now he's kind of like going off the edge, and he's just kind of, you know, being more chaotic, and Barry doesn't really know why.
Hmm.
Here's another double panel, and then we
Yeah.
cut to the day before. Um, Patty it was going on a she and Barry kind of went on a weekend vacation where she was investigating an unsolved mystery,
Hmm.
and I don't think it ever gets resolved, at least not in this volume. Um, but
Yeah, I don't think so.
she mentions that there was like a murder and there's only one witness, and they were able to talk about they were able to get an interview with the witness, and then Iris West might also have some additional information about the case as well. Then we cut to that night where the doctor is talking to Barry. He says that he's able to kind of give him this heads up display like computer thing so that he can like see the power that he's kind of radiating, because the more he uses powers, the less stable reality is, like we mentioned. But he's able to be like, so if you use like 80% of your power or less, you're probably fine, but if you kind of go above that, that's when things start to get a little crazy.
Right.
So there's like this display. And he also mentions the new cosmic treadmill where he's able to kind of like um almost like de-radiate himself. Like if he has too much speed force radiation on him, he can kind of just run and it'll get into these little batteries. And then he mentions that he's because it's still in the blackout, he's able to kind of repower the city with these
Hmm.
batteries. Then we got back to the present again. um, Flash and Captain Cold are fighting, and then this boat that has both Patty and Iris on it, which was kind of up here on this little iceberg thing,
Hmm.
it like breaks in half and then starts to fall. And then we cut to that morning. Captain Cold's with his sister, which I believe maybe not in this continuity, but in the earlier, well, maybe I don't even know, but in the TV show, she was like the Gold Glider or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
I think in the past comic she was, but in this it doesn't seem like she was ever
right.
had that identity.
Yeah, and so she has a tumor, but because of the blackout, there's not really anything the doctor can do.
Hmm.
Captain Cold mentions using like a laser or something. Like,
Yeah, he stole it, but they
yeah,
don't have the power to use it. Like they're operating on generators, I think.
right. And so the generator doesn't have enough to power the laser. So
Yeah.
because of the Flash and the EMP and all that, so that's why
Right.
Captain Cold is really angry at the Flash.
Hmm.
And then yeah, there's just more fighting, and then we see Iris on the ship. And then we cut to 15 minutes before the fight. Patty and Barry are meeting with Iris and talking about that case that Patty was talking about. Then we pick up with 10 minutes later. The fighting is just beginning, and Captain Cold is freezing over the river, and that's where we see the boat on the iceberg thing. And then we cut to the present again. They're fighting. The boat falls over, and in order to like save Iris, Barry has to kind of like move like crazy fast. Like he has to use like not, I think like I don't know if it says, but he uses like 90% of his power or whatever. Yeah. And so in doing so, it kind of creates another wormhole and it sucks in the half of the boat that Iris was on. So he's able to save Patty and some of the passengers. But as you can see in this panel, that's kind of reminiscent of Christ Landed for the Nerds. Patty is sort of, not Patty, Iris is sucked up into the wormhole with her half of the ship. And then he rescues Captain Cold out of the water. And it's because his skin generates the Isanati gun. It sort of like messes up when he gets in water and kind of covers him all in ice. And he's able to thaw him out. And he's just because he's really mad, he does that thing where to visually represent that the hero is getting angry, he kind of sits on top of him and just wails at him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do that thing, and then he kind of mentions that his sister has cancer, and then Flash just kind of walks away. And then he meets back up with the doctor at the treadmill, and he's able to power up a battery. But then also, in doing so, he didn't tell the doctor, but he's able to run fast enough to create another wormhole. And we kind of see, like, we don't really know what this is, but we'll figure it out next issue. It's kind of a flash of just gorillas talking. But anyway, so Captain Cold is arrested, but they also were able to get a battery for his sister and the laser. And so she's conscious, but she's really kind of mad at him. And then, yeah, so Patty goes to Director Singh's apartment, and we see kind of a hint at the Pied Piper, which I believe we'll see the civilian identity of him later on. But they're kind of talking about the Flash, and they're both kind of upset with him. Like we had kind of earlier on, like Singh was kind of in favor of the Flash, but at this point, after all the destruction, he's kind of not really a fan of him anymore. Yeah, and so then I think that Patty believes that Flash was sucked up and Barry was sucked up into the same wormhole as Iris.
Yeah.
So she blames it on the Flash as well, and so she kind of has a little meltdown. Then we cut to Flash inside the Speed Force, and he meets up with this guy called Turbine, who was a World War II pilot, kind of an experimental pilot, a pilot. Experimenting with his new kind of airplane, and then he just gets sucked up into one of the wormholes, and he wants to go back, obviously, to his timeline, and so he's able to kind of see like I don't know if you could see the future, but he could see like the present playing out. So he knows who the Flash is and his connection to the Speed Force and everything. So he's obviously wants the Flash to send him back, but they fight for a bit. But obviously, like you mentioned, this Flash doesn't know how to time travel, so she can't really just send him back to the past like he wants. And while they're talking, we kind of get the idea that he stutters a lot, and so we kind of get the idea that because he's been here for 70 years since World War II, time passes normally in the Speed Force. So he's been here for a very long time, and so we get the idea that he's kind of a little bit crazy. And Flash is trying to get back home to save Iris, but Turbine's like, no, he wants to go to the past. Apparently, like the future is in one direction and the past is in another direction. Again, I don't really know how the Speed Force works, but and they're kind of able to see not really other universes, but kind of, I guess, like other possibilities or something like that. I'm not really sure. But then we get back to Central City, and there's kind of a memorial for all the police officers that died, and this is the moment where we see the Pied Piper. I don't know his name.
Yeah, they say it. I forget.
Yeah, they like say it.
Hartley something,
Hartley Rockaway.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. And so anyway, we're back here. We kind of see different universes. Like I mentioned, you'll see the gorilla universe closer in
Yeah.
up later on, which in the old continuity, it was actually like an island on Earth, but apparently in this it's like a pocket dimension or something.
Something,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, they're kind of walking through. They see like all the things that were time displaced because of the wormholes. Then they get into another fight again because Flash realizes that Turbine is like crazy, and so he's like he does like a Tasmanian devil thing almost, where he's like
Yeah.
pinballing around and stuff, which is kind of it's not as destructive as Flash's powers, but it is affecting the Speed Force in a way.
Mhm.
Um, and at the end of
Well,
the
yeah,
issue,
because it turns out that like isn't he causing the wormholes?
oh yeah, yeah,
Like when he's been trying to like jump through like some portals he
mm,
sees, but every
right,
time he does, it like messes things up and creates a wormhole or something.
right,
So it's
right, right.
not really
Yeah, I missed that
Flash's
part.
fault.
Right,
For I think whenever Flash like uses a lot of his powers, it opens like a portal, and
mm,
Turbine sees it, and he like tries to go through, which causes a wormhole.
right,
So it's not really
right.
Flash's fault.
Yeah. So they fall into another wormhole, but the little computer thing that Dr.
Oh,
Elias
right.
gave the Flash fell off, and then Iris sees it with her little people on the ship.
Hmm.
And then we cut to the gorilla dimension or whatever. And this is kind of well, it's similar to the one part in Black Panther where they challenge the throne.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Only it's more. I guess it's actually kind of more what we saw in the War World books, where it's like the son challenges the father.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we see like the son gorilla, who is Gorilla Grodd, challenging the father, and they have this big. They're a bunch of talk, but then Grodd just like headbutts his dad, and then he
Yeah,
dies.
like they said something like if they whoever wins like eats the brain of the other and like gets their
Right.
memories or like something or their
Yeah. Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah. And then so this obviously is the dimension that Flash falls into. So.
Right, yeah.
Uh,
I kinda like that panel because it doesn't, like,
mm,
draw attention to Flash, it just shows him, like,
right.
dropping
In the background.
in
Yeah.
the background, yeah, it's kinda cool.
Yeah. So yeah.
So, yeah, and that kinda ends on, like, a cliffhanger, which
Right.
yeah, I'm assuming they address it in the next volume and kind of show which let us know in the comments if you will want us to cover that. I mean,
Mhm.
we might anyway because I kind of want to know what happens, but might
Right.
not be for a while. But yeah, what did you think of this book?
I thought it was really interesting. I like
Yeah.
the new 52, at least in concept. It's able to
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
take heroes we know and kind of take them in a new direction, kind
Yeah.
of uninhibited by any sort of existing canon or anything like that.
Yeah.
What it does, though, it kind of a lot of the ideas don't really feel fleshed out. Like I feel like
Mm.
we could have spent more time with the mob rule and maybe
Yeah.
Captain Cold and all that instead of
Yeah.
it kind of feels a little bit rushed, like most
Yeah.
of the new 52.
Sure. Yeah, I think like it would have made sense if like this whole volume was like the mob rule, like the first eight
Right.
issues or something, instead of like the first five, I think.
Hmm.
So yeah, think they could have done more with that, but I did find it really interesting. I'm pretty sure mob rule is original to the new 52.
Yeah, I
So
think
that was
so.
kind of an interesting concept.
Mhm.
Honestly, kind of brutal when you think about it.
Right.
Like the reason he has all those clones is because he had like his limbs cut off so many times.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I thought all that was interesting and kind of seeing Barry back at the beginning because really, like, we haven't seen Barry at his origins since like the 60s.
Right,
So that's
exactly.
kind of interesting to go back and see this. And that is
Mhm.
something about DC is like they kind of reboot stuff a lot, but you're able to kind of like they kind of kept everything the same for a long time. You know, it's kind of so like there's characters that were introduced in like the 60s and they like, you know, they haven't been rookies since like the 50s or 60s or something, you know.
Right.
So the new 52 did kind of give like these characters, you know, time to sort of like tr- try new ideas like in the modern era, which
Mm,
I did think was kind of cool. But yeah, some of them weren't the most like fleshed out. But I kind
right.
of think that the Flash run was probably some of the most interesting stuff out of the new
Mm.
52 because I honestly really like the whole thing where Captain Cold has like those ice
Yeah,
powers.
that was really
I
cool.
find that a lot more interesting than him just having, you know, the gun.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if they ever say how he got those powers, but
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty cool. I kind of forgot that was New 52 Captain Cold.
right.
Kind of cool. And I did like the art a
Yeah,
lot in this
it's
book.
really
It's
good.
not, it's not like hyper realistic, but like it's realistic enough, and it's got its own style. I feel like it just
Yeah.
really just lends to the Flash and like his visuals very well, and I feel
Mhm.
like it's kind of iconic for this New 52 run.
Yeah, you
Um,
mentioned it earlier, but the suit I really like a lot.
yes, yeah, I really like the Flash. This is probably my favorite Flash suit, honestly.
Yeah,
Like it's kind of armor, but it still looks really streamlined and like form fitting.
yeah, yeah.
And I really like the way it looks when he uses his ring to like put it on.
Mhm.
Like it seems to
Right.
just like it's not really clear how it happens. It seems like he designed it that way, but it seems like it comes out of the ring and just like forms onto his body.
Mhm.
Whereas in previous iterations, it basically just popped out of the ring and he had to like put it on.
Right,
So
right.
it's almost like an Iron Man thing, but not like
Yeah,
quite. But that is
yeah.
something that the New 52 did a lot. A lot of the heroes have armor.
Mhm.
Like Superman is Kryptonian armor, which I'll be honest, I kind of love.
Yeah.
Um, Batman has armor, which he
Mhm.
always kind of like a Kevlar like thing, but he has like actual armor. So
Like
like
plated armor, yeah.
right, exactly. So they did that a lot with the New 52, and I know some people weren't huge fans, but I honestly thought it was kind of cool
Yeah,
for the most
it
part.
makes it kinda sense,
Hmm. Yeah, and it
yeah.
kind of like fits a more modern
Right.
iteration of the characters. But yeah, all in all, pretty interesting issue. Like I didn't expect it to be that interesting, like because I like
Mhm.
it was just kind of the beginning of the like I wasn't really sure. I'd never read the beginning of the Flash New 52 run,
Right.
but it was a little more engrossing than I expected.
Mhm.
So that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have anything else
No, I think
you
we
wanted
pretty
to?
much covered it.
Yeah. So yeah, let us know in the comments what you thought of this book, and I would definitely, even though we covered it, I would suggest checking it out yourself.
Right.
But before we wrap things up, we have our cultured pick. So what is
Mhm.
your pick this week?
This week I picked Steelworks #1, and what's notable about it is it's written by Michael
Yeah.
Dorn, who is, for those of you who don't know, he played Worf on
Hmm.
Star Trek, and
Hmm.
so this is the first time he's ever written a comic book before, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool. Um,
Apparently, he was the voice of Steel in Superman the Animated Series as well, the
I
'90s
didn't know
series,
that.
which I did not realize either. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it says it on the book, like the voice of Steel is like what? So I looked it up, and yeah, very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. But this issue, it kind of almost is a sequel to the War World stuff because it talks a little bit
Oh,
about Natasha and her time there, and
gotcha.
John Henry. He kind of like has that energy source that was mentioned in that series,
Oh, right,
and he
yeah.
kind of builds a whole company around it.
Oh,
And his idea is to try to like create a society of people that are not fully dependent upon superheroes because he feels like
mhm.
people become too reliant on superheroes, and so he's trying to kind of wean them off of that.
Okay.
Not a whole lot
Hmm,
of action, but there is kind of a lot
sure.
of talk about that whole idea in this book. I think is really
It's
interesting.
kind of a setting things up book.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it's supposed to be like a 6 issue like run, right? Yeah,
Yes.
that seems to be what DC's doing with like the old
Right.
dawn of DC. Like a
Yeah.
lot of like probably like 80-90% of their
Mhm.
issues, their series right now are like 6-part mini series. Like
Yeah, and I
they
think
yeah.
what they're trying to do is trying to see which characters are popular enough to have their
Mm,
own ongoing series. So
yeah.
if you like Steel or Green Arrow or whatever, then yeah, pick up this
Yeah.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I'm not sure what they're gonna do with Flash because Flash has been like ongoing, but it seems like 800 was like the cap, and
Right.
now I believe in like September they're having like the Dawn of DC Flash. I'm not sure
Oh,
what they're gonna be doing, but yeah, like I think the Superman, Green Arrow, and Titans are the only ones that are like ongoing, like not just a 6 issue thing, but
yeah.
like Cyborg and the Superboy and
Mhm.
Adventures of John Kent and
Yeah.
this are all
Yeah.
6 issues. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of interesting, but I feel like it kind of makes it easier to collect them, and it isn't just like
Yeah,
a
for
commitment
sure.
to like 500 issues or whatever, you know.
Right, right.
So yeah, I think it makes it easier to collect in that sense. But
Mhm.
my pick this week is my all
Um,
news, I don't know what to call it exactly. I guess Ultimate Comics All New Spider-Man issue 1. It's kind of like perfect timing with Across the
mhm.
Spider-Verse coming out, but I
Right.
actually just picked this up the other day,
Mm.
and I kind of didn't realize because there have been quite a few, Miles Morales series
Mhm.
over the years. I wasn't sure if this was like the first one, but this actually is like the first
Right.
Miles Morales. series, so I got a pretty dang good deal on it, honestly. So I
Yeah.
was kind of happy with it. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's very similar. Like if you've seen Into the Spider-Verse,
Yeah.
they did stick very close to the comics.
Mhm.
The only real difference is Miles like a little younger. I think he's only like 13,
Mhm.
and they actually still have the spider has the number 42 on it, like Into the Spider-Verse, but
Right.
it comes from Oscorp, not Alchemax. And the reason Miles gets bitten by it in the movie, it was just kind of like it just kind of escaped
Right.
from Alchemax, I guess. In the comic, Prowler, his Miles's uncle, steals something from Oscorp, and the spider breaks out of its containment and hitches a ride on his duffel bag.
Mm.
So when Miles goes to visit his uncle, this spider like crawls out from under the bag and bites Miles. There's actually like kind of like a uh, freaky scene where Miles actually like starts foaming at the mouth and like passes
Oh,
out. It's not as simple as just like, oh, he just has powers, you know.
right. And I
But
will
yeah,
say that the 42 spider is different than what we saw in Across the
yes,
Spider-Verse. That twist
yes.
is not in the comics. Just
No,
yeah.
yeah, that's definitely different. But they kind of took the whole like 42 concept and spread that out more. But
Right, right.
yeah, but pretty interesting. I'd never actually gone back and read the
Mhm.
original Miles comics, so that was kind of cool. Yeah. So that is this week's episode. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you would like to support us so we can bring you more content, check us out on patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for our show's specific tier if you would like to support me and Luke specifically. Thank you to all of our current Patreon supporters: Wesley H., Mitch S., Connor Y., Anna M., Oscar B., Craig L., and Salib K. We have been your hosts, Michael Malillo and Luke S. Our logo and visual assets were designed by Jose Navarro, and our intro was designed by myself. Thanks again for joining us. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe and check out our other videos on the channel. If you're at home and you'd like to check out the Cultured Nerd on social media, you can scan the QR code on the bottom left. And if you would like to check out me and Luke's brand casual experts, we've got our own podcast and YouTube, social media, all that stuff. You can scan the QR code on the bottom right.